All right, so you've had a chance, like the rest of us, to kind of thumb through these charges, look at some of the paperwork. What can you tell us?
Well, it's interesting looking at the charges themselves, but I think maybe a little history here would be helpful too. I know you're a history buff. You love the background and the,
Sure.
how did we get here kind of thing.
Absolutely.
This is not the first time this has been done. 1960, the election between Kennedy and Nixon. There was a big dispute in Hawaii about whether or not, which slate of delegates or the electors should go, should Nixon's or Kennedy's, because the election was disputed there. Nixon had won the first count, and so the electors that were for Nixon were the ones that were certified by the then governor in 1960. The Kennedy team put together an alternate slate of electors and did the paperwork and had their alternate slate all ready to go. And then the recount was going on. Then in January, a new governor was in place, and he put a third slate of electors in place for Kennedy because he won the recount. And in Congress, then in early January, all three slates of electors were submitted to Congress for them to decide which slate of electors were they going to use. And guess who it was making the decision? Nixon. He was the vice president at the time, and he accepted the third slate, which had been approved by the new Hawaii governor, and those electors were the ones acknowledged. But there were three separate slates.
So I want to be clear about this. This is really important. It's really important in this case in Michigan now, David, because the argument, in part, if I understand this, is that this slate of electors signed on 41 days after the election, believing they claimed that the election in Michigan had been stolen from President Donald Trump, and therefore they felt that it was the right thing to do. And in fact, Michonne Maddock telling me last night, she did what the attorneys told them to do. She said, we followed the instruction of attorneys to do this, but the contention is, well, you can't be electors because you came 41 days later. But if that is true, then what happened in Hawaii in 1960 would have been illegal, and it was not. This sounds like this is politics, David. Politics, right or wrong?
No, I think that's exactly right. And when you look at the actual charges, so to get back to your first question, I mean, I've got the complaint right here. I'm sure anybody can get it. You can get it online. And there's 8 counts and all felonies, 14-year felonies, 5-year felonies. What's interesting is that there's really 3 groups of charges, even though there's 8 counts. One deals with actual forgery, which is, falsely making a counterfeit public record. And so that's the first grouping. The second grouping is uttering and publishing, which is also uttering and publishing as true a false document. That's the second group. And then the third group is dealing with election law forgery, the same kinds of things, giving false documents and having them signed and prepared. Now, what you're not hearing in the media, though, at this point, is all 3 of those types of charges also include a very important requirement for them to be proven guilty of the crime. They're what we call in the legal field specific intent crimes. And each of those say you have to have the specific intent to defraud or injure. Now, the last group just says defraud. But the idea is they had to specifically and knowingly sign that electoral document that was submitted to the National Archives and to the federal government, that they knew it was being done with the intent to defraud. I think that's going to be a very tough hill for the Attorney General's office to climb. And in fact, in that clip you played just a few minutes ago from A.G. Nessel, she acknowledged very much that, well, they may have thought they were doing the right thing, and they may have been doing it because they thought the election was being contested. But that doesn't matter. Well, guess what? It does matter.
It does matter based on what you just told me about the law, David. It very much matters what they thought.